Okay, so we have been talking for the last few weeks about seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And how we've been looking at that is that we are here to be the expression of God. We are God expressing. And so how can we more clearly and beautifully express the Godness that is our reality, what we talked about is we do this by becoming the qualities that we are seeking in the outer world. We talked about that we can seek love and we can seek freedom and we can seek abundance in the outer world, but that those things will easily fall away. But when we come back to our center and create this strong spiritual core, that I am a human being love, I am a human being faith, I am a human being abundance, and I start being that essence, then things by virtue of how the law works, things like that will begin to show up in my experience, but we won't be tied to those outer things. And that when things do change in our lives, as they do, yes, that I may be blown around a little bit, but that I will have this strong spiritual core. We started with I am a human being faith, and I encourage you that if you haven't heard these, you can go on the internet and listen to them. You can get CDs of them, because faith for me is the very first place to start, and that is really getting clear on what is it that you believe about the nature of God, because our whole life springs out of our belief in the nature of God, or whatever you want to call that, God. Then we did I am a human being love. Then we did I am a human being freedom. That was last week. So today we're going to do I am a human being trust and patience. Now I want to share with you that trust and patience really are two qualities that go hand in hand. We're going to find as we talk about it, these really go hand in hand with each other. So as I sat back and was thinking about the talk for today, I thought, well, how is God the quality of trust? And my first thought was, well, this divine creator, this divine mind has given us free will. That's a major trust right there. That's a huge aspect of trust in allowing that freedom, to us. Because if God wasn't trust, then God, divine mind, would be controlling every single thing. And we wouldn't have this independent thinking mind. We would not be co-creators. We would not be co-creating. So that was the very first thing that I saw. God is trust, absolute trust. And then how is God patience? And I can just see that this divine intelligence is patience in that there's a knowing that all things come together in their time. I look and I think, there's this allowance of disasters that literally break things apart, just on our earth, whether it's earthquakes or tornadoes or hurricanes or fires or whatever it is. And yet always out of that, there's just like this knowing that with time, a newness will arise. And then if you even go out to the universe, there's all kinds of cosmic collisions that are happening that are creating massive major fireballs and all this stuff. But again, the patience is that in time, beautiful new things are made out of that. So God is trust and God is patience. And I'll tell you what, when we start living from this, our whole life changes, because we're going to be much calmer. We're going to be much more free-flowing. It is going to be a major change as we really move into that I am a human being, trust and patience. Now, what we do know is that sometimes things break apart in our lives, or things take a lot longer to show up than we would really like them to. Yes. And many times that can feel like, we're in the darkness. And I want to share with you what Myrtle Fillmore, who's a co-founder of Unity, what she says in the book, from the book Healing Letters. If you've not read any of Myrtle, one of the things that I love about Myrtle Fillmore is Myrtle she has a really beautiful way of writing, but she doesn't fluff anything. Myrtle, man, she tells you like it is. And Myrtle doesn't really let us off the hook at all. I mean, she is like, but then again, it's this beautiful way that she writes. So this is called Day and Night Experiences. And, essentially she says that, this is referring to the daytime of the soul. We know the daytime of the soul is when it has light and everything seems to be going smoothly and it can see evidence that the divine law is working. We all know the daytime of the soul feels really good, doesn't it? Then we have the nighttime of the soul. And she says this is when a person has gone as far as the light of his consciousness will take him in a given direction, and when he must turn within and wait for more light. Now, one of the things that I really get throughout this entire talk is that trust and patience, a lot of it has to do with breathing and turning within. This really has to do with that we need these times apart to relax. Now, she says, and now Myrtle, this is 100 years ago, so she uses the word Lord, the word Father, his, so bear with me in this. She said, you may not see how the law of the Lord is working for you, but it is working just as surely as the law of growth is operative during the nighttime. Nighttime is necessary to the proper growth and development of plants, just as daytime and sunlight with their warmth are necessary. She goes on to say that we wouldn't say that business is dull with the plants during the night or that they're not receiving their good, because what we do know is that on the contrary, many times a huge transformation takes place overnight, and they need the darkness, and they need that time when more moisture comes into them, and they need what they can gain from the soil in that dark time, and that is what helps them to become what they were created to be. She says, had it not been for night and its blessings, that plant would have ceased to grow and to yield its helpfulness to us. And I think sometimes, I know for myself, on my spiritual journey, there came a point when I just thought, I am done with the nighttime things. That darkness stuff, it isn't going to hit me anymore because I'm all spiritual and I got it going on. And, when I would say that I would affirm my life is flowing with grace and ease, I thought I was affirming that I would never have those nighttime moments again. And imagine my surprise when they hit. And I'm like, hey! And imagine my surprise when they hit again, and they hit again, and they hit again, till finally, it woke me up enough to realize that it is an important and necessary part of our spiritual journey, and we want to call it bad. We want to call it bad because it doesn't feel good. It does, we do experience pain in that. We absolutely do, but that's not bad. In fact, it's needed for the deepest soul growth. And when I say soul growth, I mean our soul that is growing in this physical realm, that we are allowing it to become more present in this physical realm. Myrtle says that in this nighttime, we are to rest in the spiritual knowledge and assurance that our growth is precious in the sight of God. We are to rejoice that the divine law is ever operative, ever working to prosper all of God's children. We are to give thanks that our affairs are in the Father's hands and under the management of divine wisdom. We shall rise up to be glad for this night in which we have turned within to that great stream of light, life, love, substance, and power, and have let them flow silently into our consciousness to raise it to the Christ understanding. And that is, where this goes over and over again is that in those moments, I believe anyway, for me and what I see for a lot of people, that when those things start to fall apart, we're doing anything but being in that silence. We're generally running around like a chicken with our head going, oh my God, the worst thing has happened, and we're out here and we're moving around and there's no coming back to center, and we're telling people and we're in angst and we're crying and normal. I want you to hear that, normal. And as we continue to strengthen our spiritual core, we're going to find ourselves in less of that. We're going to catch ourselves much quicker and come back to the center, come back to this place where we can know and trust that God is always working everything together for all of our greater good, for each and every one of us. And in those times, ultimately to get to that point where we can say, I am a human being, trust and patience. And go back again to just as God knows that everything, God is trust, God is patience, everything will come together in the perfect timing, and it will come together in the most amazing way when I allow and trust. One of my acronyms that I love for the word trust is totally rely upon Spirit's ta-da! Because when we rest and trust and know and allow ourselves to sink back into that, be still and know, it's amazing what Spirit's ta-da will be. And I'm sure that's exactly what you guys experienced. I mean, not many of us have been through a tornado like that. And, to have your actual church home, I mean, it's hard for us to even fathom that we wouldn't have this place right here to come together. And yet newness comes out of everything. And, I'm sure everybody had their normal human experience in it, but because you guys are so deeply centered in principle, I'm assuming, and you can shake your head if I'm wrong, but it didn't take long to come back to that place and say, you know what, let's trust this. And I can tell really from your song in that. Okay, so that's trust. So let's talk about patience. I always love the story of the man who found the cocoon of the butterfly, and he brought it home. I'm going to put this look. And he brought it home, and he put it, right beside his desk, and he noticed that the butterfly, after a few days, it was really struggling to get out of the cocoon, and he thought, well, I'll just help the butterfly out. So he snipped the cocoon, and the butterfly's body just plopped out onto his desk, and it was just big and full of liquid, and its wings were not able to move, and he was so surprised by that. But he thought, in the next few days he's going to dry out, he's going to shrink, he's going to be able to fly. But that's not what happened. The butterfly's short life, he was just hanging around on the ground. And that was because the butterfly needs to go through that small opening. It needs to struggle out of that, because that is what pushes that liquid out of its body. And by moving through that struggle, then it can come out, and its wings are able to support its body. So, the man thought he was helping it by pushing it, by making it happen sooner than what it really was supposed to happen. And I was talking to a friend recently about this whole waiting process, and I shared with him that, that's one of my challenges too. Working on healing, that I want it now. And I have to keep reminding myself, again, I go back to Myrtle, that Myrtle loved and blessed her body for 2 solid years, before she really was actually healed. So we are a culture of fast everything. I want it now, and generally we can have it right now. Almost always I want it now, because that's what our culture is about. So I believe that there's a couple things that happen here when it comes to working with patience. When things aren't happening as fast as I really want them to, one thing is that we push to make them happen. And you can do that. You can push to make them happen. But I can promise you this, that because it's not really ready, that it's not going to stay, and it's not going to be as marvelous as it could have been. I was out, I love to garden. Now, I don't like to garden big gardens. I just love to garden at home. I could spend hours out in my gardens. And so I was out there the other day, and I was thinking about this talk, and so I went and I was looking at my tomato plant. I'm like, I want a tomato, and I want it now. So I picked a little green tomato off that tomato plant. Do you think it tasted like the tomato I was envisioning? Do you think its texture was even anywhere near the texture I'm used to with a yummy red ripe tomato? Absolutely not. because it needed the time that it needs in order to be its best creation, its most juicy, ripe, yummy tomatoiness. Aren't they just the best fresh tomatoes? And, think about that with our life. That when we push for things to happen and we push it too fast, that I promise you, they're not going to be as marvelous as they could have been had we not pushed so hard. And, things come up like, maybe you're in a relationship and you feel a lot stronger than the other person about wanting to get married. This person isn't, not really wanting to get married now, and you push it, and they finally give in. You're probably going to have some issues because you push. Starting a business, and you don't have all your ducks in a row yet, but man, you want to get that business started, so you push and you get it started. You're probably going to have some issues. So just, even working out, you go in that first day and you do everything that you can possibly do. You're going to have some issues, like not being able to walk for a few days. So just, that's one of the things that we push. The other thing that I notice about when, at least for me, when I'm getting impatient, is sometimes I quit doing what is mine to do. And for me, that would be like me planting my garden, like planting it, and then I'm going to prepare the soil, and then I'm going to plant it, and then for 2 weeks, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to water it, I'm going to make sure it's taken care of, and then at the end of that 2 weeks, it's not doing anything yet. It's not, the flowers aren't blooming, or the tomatoes or the peppers, they're not to their fullness yet. So I just quit. Well, if we quit giving them what they need, what's going to happen? They're going to die. And so for me, that's the same thing with our lives, is that it's easy for us to quit doing our spiritual work. It's easy for us to quit. Myrtle Fillmore loved and blessed her body every day, probably multiple times a day. No matter what was going on, that's what she did. Financially, we may do our visualization, do our work that gets, because we're reconditioning our consciousness. That's all that this is about, allowing it to come forth. And it doesn't change in a week or a month, and then we stop. And to me, that's like, we start to stretch rubber band, and then we quit, bam, it just goes back. We keep stretching, we keep continuing to feed. Just imagine that our consciousness, that's the fertile ground. And so we're feeding these seed ideas that we've planted with visuals and words that keep us focused on that until it gets a good root system, and then it begins to produce its harvest. And that is a huge part of patience. Now, one of the things that I absolutely do know too is that patience has a lot to do with the whole waiting and the turning within process. And know that it doesn't mean that we don't do what is ours to do, because we do that. We don't push, but then we do what is ours to do, and we let go and we let God. Just like we do what we do with a garden, and we don't sit out there and just wait. We go about and do our life. And it's the same thing with our life experience. We do what is ours to do, and we let go and let God. And so much of this, again, friends, it's about turning within. It's about taking that time to just breathe. We talk about breathing every week, don't we? Because it's so important. All of us are breathing, but most of us are not really deeply breathing. So take a couple of really deep breaths. And feel your shoulders relax. Just let your body, just feel yourself relax in your jaw, your eyes. Karen Drucker has a song called Waiting, and it says, "It's not in trying, but in trusting. It's not in running, but in resting. It's not in wondering, but in praying that we find the strength of the one. I am waiting, I am waiting. I allow myself to wait." And in that waiting, in those moments of just As what we're doing is we are letting go of the anxiety, the angst, and the anxiety and angst are detrimental to the unfoldment of our desires. So we're letting go of the anxiety and the angst, and in that time, trusting, totally relying upon Spirit's tada. I can totally trust. Even if it doesn't yet look like, or even if the ultimate thing doesn't look like what you thought it was going to look like, I promise you that when you give it to God, when you open yourself up to that, it will be far better than you could have ever even have begun to possibly imagine. That's totally relying up on Spirit's tada. And one of the last things in the trust and patience is also Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is a substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. Now, Hebrews 11:3 says, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So there's two aspects to this insofar as that which is unseen, is that we can't see what's happening in this invisible realm, but it is, and that's where we trust. Our part is to have our eyes open enough that we start looking for the evidences that are appearing all around us, because there's evidences appearing every day. And I always like to think of this as a fork in the road. If I am desiring a romantic relationship and I see a couple that seems to be really wonderful example of what that romantic relationship is, I'm at that fork in the road where I can look at that and say, I'm never going to have that look. That's so far away from me. Or I can look at that and go, oh my gosh, that's an evidence showing up in my life that it's getting closer to me. If I'm desiring more abundance, financial freedom in my life, and I see people who are able to just go and go on trips, a fork in the road, I can look at that and I can say, oh man, I wish I could do that. I'm never going to be able to do that. Or, oh wow, look at that. There's evidence showing up in my life right there that says it's getting closer. Now, which one is going to make you feel better? The second way, of course. So, your homework this week, if you choose to do it, is to have that as your affirmation. I am a human being, trust and patience. Trusting that everything is working together for the greater good, totally relying upon Spirit's ta-da! And letting go and letting God, knowing that everything is working even when I cannot see it. It is working. It absolutely is working. And I can totally trust that. So I'm going to invite us to close with our affirmation, which is, I am a human being, trust and patience. Together, I am a human being, trust and patience. And so it is. Amen and amen.